Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing for Thursday, the 25th of May. I'm Aidan Macdonald and today I'm joined by Ryan McGinlay. Ryan, how are you?
I'm all right. After watching that game last night, I'm just all right. But I'm sure we'll get to talking about it.
I'm sure that's probably a lot of people's reaction after the sort of defeat at Easter Road last night is also what you're referring to there. It was a 4-2 Celtic lost in the end after being 2-1 up at one stage, but we'll get into that shortly, breaking it all down. Before we do, I would just encourage anybody who was interested to take a look at the ticker tape down below. We're currently running our best ever subscription offer. It's £12 for a year's worth of access to the website. So that gets you things like videos from Ryan, big interviews from Tony. Recently spoke to Cameron Carter-Vickers' former coaches, tactical pieces, scouting pieces, which I'm sure will be interesting going into the transfer window, which will be opening next month, or not next month, sorry, will be opening in July. So if that interests anybody, the ticker tape down below's got all the sort of relative information. If you go to www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe, so get yourself involved in that if you haven't already. So Ryan, as we obviously alluded to just at the intro there, it was a tough night for Celtic in the end. From what looked like it was going to be a decent result, and then they were in a promising position, it all just kind of went wrong that last sort of 20-25 minutes. Obviously, we'll talk about individuals. I know in particular, there'll probably be a couple of players that people want to talk about. But what was your just kind of general thoughts in the match?
Do you know, I actually thought we were playing well up until the sending off. I thought we were playing really well until Haksabanovic got taken off. Then I think the mood and the tempo of the game just completely changed. It sounds terrible to sort of label it on the one player, but when Maeda came on, it just wasn't as good as when Haksabanovic was sort of causing problems down that left hand side. But yeah, you look at the possession stats: 70% possession, 583 passes. We dominated proceedings in terms of possession, and then until it all just fell apart with that sending off. We were up. We were up winning twice in the game, and we still managed to get beat 4-2 in what was probably one of the weirdest games I've watched this season in terms of the way it ebbed and flowed. But yeah, 4-2 against Hibs, dead rubber or not, end of the season or not, I still think that's a pretty unacceptable result, especially considering we've got a cup final in a week and we need to be building form towards that. So yeah, I think changes are going to need to be made for Saturday.
I think Plunge McNugget agrees with you, Ryan. He's saying the worst performance under Ange. That's maybe
I think it's been worse.
It's I think for a lot of people the Bodo Glimt games would kind of stick out as a bit of a sore thumb in terms of brutal performances, but a lot of people obviously are not very happy about last night, as you would expect. In Northampton, Tim, there's only one player since the semi-final past Mark Starfelt. I know particularly like Tony, he's kind of been obviously doing the ratings over that game period, and Starfelt has been near enough, usually in and around the highest person, with the exception of maybe Callum McGregor. Obviously, McGregor kind of struggling a wee bit at Ibrox. I think Starfelt might have had a higher rating than him that game, but overall, he's been the only one that's kind of been up there getting decent marks, with the exception of, we should clarify, obviously, Celtic beating Hearts to win the league 2-0. It wasn't a vintage performance, obviously, but they did win and get the title over the line. But yeah, the team, unfortunately, seemed to have just ran out a bit of steam, Ryan, and it's obviously, we understand the context of they've won the League Cup, they've won the league, they're in a good place to hopefully go on and win a treble, but some of the performances have been a wee bit disappointing, and last night was probably the sort of maybe as bad as it got. I know Celtic did lose 3-0 to Rangers, but I think going into these sort of Glasgow derby games, you know, it's like they do have the second best team in the country, so the quality level in terms of under Celtic, that is at its strongest at that point. They've had everything to really play for in that game. Celtic didn't really have anything, so as much as you weren't accepting that result, it was, you could maybe see something like that coming. But last night, particularly when Celtic were winning 2-1, it was disappointing that they went on to lose 4-2. It was a bit of a collapse. I'm saying whether or not it's the worst performance under Ange, I don't know. But that's maybe a separate whole podcast we could discuss. But yeah, people are obviously I'm quite disappointed with last night. It's one of those ones. I can also understand if, for example, Alan was saying, are folks still panicking on here? I can understand that point of view as well, because some people look at it and say, look, these are dead rubbers. You know, they don't really mean anything for the context of the season. But I think in terms of just wanting Celtic to build momentum going into the Scottish Cup final, so you can sort of see both ways for it. I guess we just sort of start getting at the goals then, Ryan. So it obviously started off, Scott Bain at the start of the game, it probably seems like so long ago now, but he made some good saves, didn't he? There was one in particular from Kevin Nisbet. It looked like it was almost over the line and he managed to keep it out. So at the start, if we just try and separate what happened later on, what was your thoughts on Scott Bain at the start of the match?
Yeah, I thought he was doing quite well. I thought he was actually, I made this point in one of the group chats I'm in, that he was making saves that maybe Joe Hart wouldn't have saved. But then I think you've seen the complete other side of that in the second half, where he didn't make a save where Joe Hart certainly would have, or he wouldn't have made that mistake rather, but I'm sure we'll get onto that when we get to it. But yeah, he had a good start to the game. His distribution was good. He's coming out for crosses was quite good as well. I was like, what's going on here? You know, Scott Bain's having a really good performance. He's getting off his line quite quickly. So yeah, he had a good game to start off with, and I think it's important to say that Hibs probably should have had a couple of goals in the first half if it wasn't for his saves. They had really good chances. That Eli Johan, I know he got 2 goals in the game, but he looked a constant threat for Hibs coming. I don't know if he was playing up front or out wide. It was one of the two. Maybe it was in between, but it seems that he's always a danger when he's playing against us. He seems to really enjoy that battle against Celtic, and the fact that Hibs have got him on a permanent deal, I think, is a real coup for them. But yeah, in the first half, Hibs could have had a couple of goals, but we get the goal through the penalty, and I was like, 1-0. We should be okay going into the second half. I'm sure we'll talk about what happened or what transpired after that.
Yeah, I think, like you say, Scott Bain, he did make some really crucial saves at the start. Hibs could have been 2-3-0 up before Celtic got that penalty. Andrew Goyer is also saying Ange has to manage the squad to ensure everyone is game ready come the final. I think we can understand that well. I know he's maybe made too many changes. It's probably another discussion. But yeah, I agree that Scott Bain did make a positive contribution for the first half and a bit of the start of the second half as well. He sort of made some good saves. His distribution was looking quite tidy as well, and you were starting to sort of think, maybe he can put in a good positive contribution here. But as you know, it didn't transpire. But yeah, Celtic went 1-0 up. They'd had a couple of chances, obviously. I think Odes forced a save from the keeper. One that Abad, maybe should have done better with. It bounced back out to him and then he put it wide. I think it was hit the bar as well with a header. So Celtic had chances. Eventually the penalty came. I take it. There wasn't that much discussion really about it. It was a clear penalty, I think, Ryan, wasn't it? Lewis Stevenson kind of just took out Callum McGregor.
Yeah, it was one of those ones where I remember, maybe it was more on the byline when it happened, but remember Izagiri at Pittodrie where the chance had gone, and then Izagiri slide tackles, and it was one of those ones where the ball was away from McGregor. He just feels the contact and he goes down, or he feels the challenge and goes down. It was a stonewall penalty. I don't think anyone had any complaints about it whatsoever. I know Hibs TV were kind of moaning about it, but it was one of those ones that was a stonewall penalty. Just going back to what we were talking about with Bo, those chances, especially that first one he had when it came to him and he put it over the bar, that's the sort of chance that Kyogo scores, unfortunately. I think he scored about 10 or 15 of them this season. That sort of snapshot one where it just comes to him. That's what Kyogo's really good at. He's good at just putting that ball in the back of the net. And I think as time goes on, he'll need to learn that those chances he can't be missing, because he should have had at least 2, maybe even 3 in the first half, you would say. I mean, I'm glad we'll talk about his goal later on in the game, but he could have had a double at least in the first half. So he needs to do better in that regard when he gets his chance.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Ryan. I think he probably does need to be a wee bit sharper. Hopefully, it's something that will come with playing a wee bit more. But then I suppose you could argue this is probably the most consistent run of minutes he's had really since Celtic won the league. In terms of he's been starting games rather than just coming off for cameos off the bench. So I think, we'll obviously give him praise when it comes to his goal later on, but I think he's got to be a wee bit sharper and take advantage of those opportunities, because as much as we're discussing Hibs could have been 2 or 3-0 in the first half, Celtic probably should have been at least 2-0, potentially 3-0 up themselves, which ended up unfortunately costing Celtic later on. So going in 1-0 at half time, Hatate took his penalty really well, nice and calm down the middle, as you like to see. And then later on, obviously, sort of the collapse kind of started, didn't it? It was a.
It's like a collapse, but then it's all right. But then a collapse again.
Yeah, it was a sort of collapse. Maybe at that point wasn't the best way to describe it, but it was on the way to a collapse. But obviously for Hibs' goal, I think the cross goes in. Ralston doesn't maybe quite at the best with his head, but also the whole sort of position of the Celtic defence isn't great there. And then Ewan, to be fair, he takes it really well. It's a great finish, but he is kind of relatively unchallenged on the box there. You know, like getting a free shot like that is not really great defending from Celtic. But I don't think anybody can really have a go at Scott Bain for that goal because it was some finish, wasn't it?
No, it was a phenomenal finish, and it sounds a wee bit like the Ellie Yuan podcast when it comes to me talking about him. But I've got to be honest, I've been impressed every time I've seen him play for Hibs. I think he looks like a really, really good sort of player for Hibs. Maybe it could go on to better things in the future, but yeah, he was unchallenged with his shot. It was a good shot. It was really well placed into the corner. Nothing Scott Bain could do about that goal in particular. So yeah, it was a good goal. That goal kind of came out of the blue, and you're like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen here? But it was a good goal by Yuan. But Celtic did respond quite well to that.
Yeah, no, they did respond. Just before we sort of discuss more of the goals, I thought this comment was interesting. Wombat saying, I think we've missed Moy immensely. Sorry. Obviously, before Aaron Moy kind of picked up the knock he's got right now, he had kind of dropped out of the team. But you can't help but think when all these changes have been happening that Moy would have been right in there getting starts as part of that in the midfield. And maybe that would add a wee bit more experience and a wee bit of steel, sort of somebody to grab the sort of game by the scruff of the neck and say, you know, just calm down. So I think I do agree with that. Not having Aaron Moy as an option when you're making these changes maybe has hurt the team a wee bit. But so when it comes to the next goals, obviously O gets the second one. He has the ball. I can't remember exactly who passed it into him, Ryan, but
I think it was Bernabe or McGregor, one of the two.
So O obviously did well to sort of hold off his man and then took the ball below David Marshall. That was sort of a good finish, wasn't it? And he thought maybe at that stage, right, Celtic are sort of they're back in this year. Hopefully, maybe going to go on and get another goal.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this finish from O. I think this was the highlight of the game, to be honest, because I thought that he worked really, really hard. Yes, his finishing wasn't great throughout the game. They always had that chance, you know, the one that Abada should have scored the rebound off of, but the sort of turn and then shot. It shows that he does have some technical ability when he's got the ball. He's got a good first touch a lot of the time. But just going on to that goal, it's a scrappy goal, but that's the goal that I want to see O scoring. Those are the goals, because at the end of the day, you don't get extra points or extra brownie points for a better goal. Every goal counts at the end of the day. So seeing him score a scrappy goal like that was quite reaffirming. He sort of stabs it home with his foot. I really enjoy that sort of finish. And he did deserve that goal with the amount of chances he was getting, and he seemed to really, really enjoy it as well when he celebrated. It was like a lot of pressure had went off his shoulders, and I enjoyed that goal as well. I was happy when he scored it.
Yeah, I think everybody was delighted to see O getting his goal. I think that's his 5th goal for Celtic since he joined in January. So he has missed a couple of chances in games, but 5 goals is an okay return, and hopefully he'll be able to kick on next season. But yeah, I think everybody was kind of delighted to see him score that. Obviously, not long after that, I guess we'll go into the Maida red card. He was obviously already on a booking, and you could kind of just see. I was getting similar vibes round to, I think we discussed it recently, even though he didn't get sent off in that game, Sorrow and Betis. Or just Sorrow in general, I suppose, yeah. The way he started running about recklessly. I should say before that, after Maida he wasn't like flying in constantly like Sorrow after the yellow card, but just the way he was sort of, approaching players at speed, it looked like it was going to, and then unfortunately, yeah, there can be no complaints, I think, about that second yellow or the first yellow, really, can there?
No, I thought he got away with a couple, and then he got his booking, and then it's almost as if he kept on playing as if he didn't get a booking, as if he got a final warning, when somebody should have told him, right, you've been booked, you're going to get yourself sent off. The referee was giving him every opportunity to sort of stay on the park, giving him chance after chance, but it got to the point where unfortunately the referee kind of had to send him off with the amount of persistent fouls he was doing or he was committing. It was, I tweeted about it last night, and I still stand by the point. I think it's poor management from Ange, because a couple of minutes earlier, Ange takes Abada off. Now I know that Maeda had just been brought on or he'd been brought on halfway through the first half due to Haksabanovic's injury. But you've got to sub a sub sometimes if it's not working out for them, or if they're at risk of getting sent off and putting the team's result at risk. So I think that was quite poor foresight from Ange, and I think he should have taken Maeda off instead of Abada. But although, to be fair, Abada was having an absolute nightmare as well. That's one thing I would say about the two performances. Although Maeda got himself sent off and he was the guilty party in terms of the result maybe swinging in Hibs' favour, I thought Abada didn't do himself any favours with his performance. I actually think he did hide quite a lot in the game as well. I thought he likes to, as Tony said in his reaction, he likes to play on the periphery of things at times. I think sometimes he can sort of shy away and not get involved in the game, and that's really disappointing for me because I know how good Abada can be in games like this. We know he's got a goal scoring ability, so to see him sort of be quiet in a game like this is quite disappointing. But you know, Maeda's the guilty party at the end of the day. He gets himself sent off, and the game kind of turns from there.
Yeah, it was quite reckless for Maeda going in like that, and I'd put up Seamus Gallagher's comments. He was agreeing with you, Ryan, saying he should have been taken off, and I did have that kind of feeling myself. My only sort of hint was, you know, the whole sub and a sub thing, as you mentioned, but sometimes it has got to be done for tactical reasons. It's not always just down to a player being injured, that's why that happens, and maybe that's something Ange will look back on, because I'm sure he could sense, you know, if we're watching it, sensing that maybe Maeda's angry for whatever reason, or maybe his head's not fully at it. I'd assume that Ange and the coaching staff probably knew the same. But yeah, it was disappointing. And after that, I don't think anybody expected the game to turn out exactly the way it was, but you knew, even though Celtic were 2-1 up, it was going to be a bit of a uphill struggle there. So obviously, so a wee while after that, Celtic Hibs get a corner, and then Ralston just fouls the boy to the deck. In fact, I want to actually know before I touch on that. Sorry, there's the Hibs red card that got overturned. It was Jake Doyle Hayes on Rio Hatate. He sort of, you know, so Hatate's breaking forward, and the Hibs player goes right in at the back of him. It's Kevin Clancy showed him a straight red, but quite quickly it became clear it was going to be a VAR call. He went over and checked the monitor, if I remember rightly, and then he overturned it to a yellow card. Ryan, what was your general thoughts on that when you first seen it? Did you think it was a red card, or did you find that was a bit harsh? Or
so when the challenge happened, I was like, that's a Stonewall red card. Looking back on it, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if I've mellowed or not on it. It's one of those ones where I'd need to see the actual rules, because in my view, this is at least in my view, he's not going for the ball. He takes down his opponent professionally, try to take him from try to stop the Celtic player from initiating a breakaway. Now, I don't know about the rules, but if I think it's got to be amended that sort of challenge is a red card. I remember John Lundstrom gets sent off. In fact, it might have been actually against Hibs for the exact same thing in an away game earlier on this season. It's one of those ones where I don't think the player's going for the ball whatsoever. He's taking the player out. I don't know if he actually studs him. It's one of those ones that looked worse on the first viewing. When I seen it happen, I was like, this is a red card. It's got to be. So maybe it was a yellow card, but I think it's something for the authorities to maybe look at in terms of what to do in that situation, because the player's not going for the ball. He's trying to take the man down. And I think it's just one of those disappointing tackles. It's one of those ones I think can go either way, but I can see why it was disallowed, but at the same time, I can see why the verdict was changed, but at the same time, I could probably see why it would stay the same if it did.
Yeah, I think that's a sort of solid consensus, Ryan, to be honest, about how it was. I thought it was a clear red. I thought it was a leg breaker type challenge the first time I seen it. Then as I
said
seen
that
it
as well.
back, I did sort of actually I thought about that Lundstrom challenge, maybe because it was against Hibs, it was in my head, but that then popped up and I was like, maybe it's not quite a straight red, but you have seen them given. Look, the fact there was VAR there, they went and looked at it, and maybe in the end a yellow card was a fair decision, but as you have seen challenges like that given before in terms of the red cards being shown, and there's not been a lot of sort of discourse about it. People have been like, that's a clear red, but I think yes, that's what VAR is there for in that stage, because the referees only see something for a split second. You know, it's right in the middle of the park. There's not like there's any of the linesmen that are able to see that properly. So the fact the VAR's there, they go review that, and yeah, I guess you can debate whether or not they made the right decision, but it definitely wasn't as bad as when I first seen it, and I think that's probably a fair way of looking at it. Seamus Gallagher's coming in again saying it was a dangerous tackle as Bigelow had to go off not long after it. There was a few other ones saying never a red card, some people saying it was, so maybe not everybody's on the exact same page on it, but whether or not that's clouded by Maida getting a red card shortly before, I don't know. But
the fact that there's a debate on this, though, does that not maintain the fact that it's not a clear and obvious error from the referee and that the decision should stand? If it's not a clear and obvious error and there is room for debate on that, then I think that decision is dubious and it should probably stand in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, that's also an argument that can be made as well. The only thing I would say is it's very rare. I've found sometimes this Maida one would be been an exception. Everybody's fully agreed that it is, it's not a red or it's not a second yellow or it's not a penalty, whatever. And that goes for all clubs, to be fair, on pretty much any decision. But yeah, I think that is another debate worth having, and I'm sure that's something that come the end of the season, if we're maybe discussing VAR instances maybe happened across the campaign, that'll be a sort of point that crops up. But to get back to obviously the game itself, not long after that red card that was overturned, Celtic then Hibs have a corner, the ball comes in and Anthony Ralston just, I don't know what he's doing there. He just completely hauls the Hibs player down. It doesn't even look like that player's going to get the ball. And he just sort of goes right through, basically grabs him from behind and falls on top of him. It's just comedy stuff and probably one of the worst bits of defending I've actually seen for a while. I know Ralston obviously at the weekend had a couple of hours. The sort of big kick it kind of led to that goal from the ball getting chipped over to him, but that was just really poor, Ryan, wasn't it?
Yeah, I feel like Ralston's form recently has been very, very alarming, and it's ever since Alistair Johnston got injured. I think you can see just how much of an upgrade Alistair Johnston is when you put him in the side instead of Ralston. He's just a better player at the end of the day. Johnston is the first choice right back. It's very clear to see when he's in the team. Don't want to go too hard on Ralston. I know he's done really well to get back in the Celtic side, but at this point, I think he's just backup at this point for Alistair Johnston, and hopefully Johnston is fit for Saturday in the cup final next weekend, because I think he would go a long way to sort of alleviate the stress off of Starfelt and that defence. It feels as if Starfelt's the captain of the Titanic, and at the back for him, he's trying his best to keep everything sort of in shape. He's the one trying to keep everything in order, but there's just disasters going on around him. It seems about three out of the four had an absolute nightmare. I thought he was the only one that sort of got pass marks, as you said. But yeah, getting Ralston back or getting Alistair Johnston back in that lineup will go a long way to sort of alleviate the stress for the Celtic team.
Alistair Jack saying Ralston peaked last year. Ange McGinlay saying Ralston missed a lot of football with his injuries. Sort of the Ralston conversation is one that we've discussed quite a lot, to be fair. In terms of, at one point there was a debate between whether or not he was going to be an option ahead of Juranovic when he was still at the club. I know me and Tony sort of debated that point quite regularly. I'd always was of the opinion that Juranovic was just a level above, really, Ralston. Then Alistair Johnston sort of just came in. He's really kicked on. He's been phenomenal. It's been unfortunate he's been injured. You can't help but think that maybe Ralston would have played a couple of these games, but games such as the match at Ibrox, maybe the game against St Mirren, Johnson would have been starting those matches. So the fact that it looks like he's hopefully going to be at least potentially involved at the weekend and then starting for the cup final is ideally going to be a sort of a boost, I think, for the Celtic defence, much needed cover. We should probably highlight as well, obviously, that Greg Taylor wasn't playing last night. The fact Bernabeu was in, that's maybe a separate discussion about whether or not he's good enough, but he obviously had these contributions setting up O's goal. But from a defensive standpoint, he was found lacking quite regularly, and maybe the fact Taylor wasn't in either, that can added even less balance, which was something we discussed after the game at Ibrox. But yeah, Ralston, he has struggled a bit recently. I know there's been a few comments, people are saying, is he reverting back to the player he was before? I don't know if I would quite go that far, but there is maybe a discussion to be had about whether or not Celtic need to look for another right back in terms of even a backup option or somebody to challenge Johnson, because as much as we think Johnson's a very good player, guys can get injured, and would you want to be going into a Champions League game potentially against, Manchester City or something like that with Anthony Ralston at right back? I think without trying to go in on him too much, I don't think you would you, Ryan?
No, not at all. I think you don't want to go into him too much, but you've got to. How bad was Juranovic at the start of the season? If that's the case,
exactly.
if Anthony Ralston was regularly getting ahead of him in the team, just shows you that maybe Juranovic's eyes were elsewhere, even from earlier on in the season. I know a lot of people didn't want to talk about the drop off in form Juranovic had, but it was very clear to see that he just wasn't playing the same as he was the season before. We all knew how good Juranovic was, and then he wasn't hitting those levels that he was or that he was doing previously. I think we'll get problems at both fullback positions if our first choice doesn't get if our first choice gets injured. I think left back is a big problem because if you spend 3.75 million, I've made this point a couple of times. If you spend 3.75 million on a left back, then I would expect him to be starting most games. Now, the fact that Bernabei's coming into the team, it looks like he can't even pass the ball 10 yards without giving it away. Every pass seems to either be too short, too long, too hard, or too soft. And defensively, I know he done well for the 2 goals, but it's all about this eye test that I keep on talking about. The guy cannot defend. He looks like a failed winger that's been put at left back, and you're seeing the defensive deficiencies that he brings. I mean, the wingers we had all in last night were just really poor across the board. I thought even the players that came on, but Bernabei just, I think it's, for me, I think alarm bells should be ringing about this guy because it's 3.5-4 million for a guy that can't even break into the first team most weeks. Sometimes he didn't even make the bench. He was only making the bench due to necessity. So yeah, I think rapid improvements need to be made on his part, or we're going to need to be looking for another left back in the summer.
Yeah, I'm starting to sort of be of that perception as well. And obviously, after a defeat like that, it can be easy to overreact. But I think we've discussed this about Bernabei before. Even if last night's game didn't turn out the way it did, that he's very raw, for the money it's been paid for, and he's going to need definitely a lot of coaching if he's going to be turned into any sort of challenger for Greg Taylor. Just wanted to flash up the Marquis saying Starfelt did look head and shoulders above the rest. We also touched on that. I can't find it now, but there was the comment from Charlie McGarvey, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
See if I can just get that because it was just cutting about.
Is it about the projects?
Yeah. We need to stop signing. Yeah, there we go. We're still buying too many projects, so we'll never be good enough. That's what maybe a separate debate in terms of transfer strategy. I guess you could say though, maybe signing somebody like Rio Hatate was potentially a project with his age. He's also turned out to be a good player. Bernabei, Kobayashi. I think it's maybe still a wee bit too early to make definite judgments on Kobayashi because he's still not played a lot of football. But Bernabei's been here near enough a season, even if he's not featured a lot. I'd imagine he'll be starting to rack up the appearances now. I don't know the exact numbers, but it'll be, imagine, well over 20, 25 appearances. And at times he has looked really off it. I think the sort of analysis or the analogy, you made of he is like a winger that's been thrown in at left back. It's exactly what it's like. And I understand he's picking up assists here and there, but I need my defenders to be able to defend, Ryan. It's a basic thing to say, but for the Celtic team, we're not looking for our fullbacks to be scoring. Not that he's doing this, but to be scoring or providing 20 assists a year. That's not the way the Celtic team's working. We've got the forward players that can do that. Obviously, they need to contribute to the attack with the inverted wing back role, which is probably why he's picking up these assists. But he's got to be able to do the basics as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I think that goal at Dingwall has taken a lot of the pressure off of him. I think if you score a wonder goal, the fans maybe won't talk about your performances for a couple of weeks, but I think it's very, very clear now that defensively he's just not up to scratch at all. And I see the comment from Charlie that too many projects. I don't even think Bernabei was a project. For 3.75, Celtic can't afford to be buying projects. That should be a ready-made first-team player. Greg Taylor should effectively... Now, Greg Taylor's had a great season, a phenomenal season, but for 3.75 million, Greg Taylor should have maybe played half the games. That's down to Bernabei not making the grade, in my opinion. For stuff that's happened maybe off the pitch and on the pitch, he just hasn't been able to settle in the team and play his best football. Either that or he's just not up to the level required, which I think then raises questions for the scouting. How many times did we watch this guy? We know that, especially for Ange Postecoglou's system, players need to be able to play the inverted fullback role. If he can't play that, then why was he scouted? Why was he specifically chosen out if he can't pass the ball, or he's not comfortable coming into the midfield? Because he hardly does come into the midfield. He likes to sort of overlap and play across into the box, which is one of his strengths, I would say. He is not a bad crosser. He does take corners as well and does get balls into the box. Remember that cross against St Johnstone, Giacomakis was a really good cross, and then he got another one from Giacomakis a couple of weeks later, I remember. But it's just there's too many deficiencies in his game for me at the moment, and I think this summer's going to be a big one for him in terms of his future. I think he's really got to hit the ground running, or we need to be looking elsewhere for a new left back.
Yeah, I would agree, Ryan. I think he's got a big pre-season ahead, and if it becomes clear he's not going to be up to scratch, then a bit like the discussion with Alston, do you want to be going into a game against a top European team with Bernabei at left back because Greg Taylor's out injured? Not really, based off how he's performing right now. But yeah, so Kevin Nisbet, he dispatched that penalty. Can't remember the last time a Celtic goalkeeper, obviously most of this is aimed at Joe Hart, dived the right way for a penalty, never mind actually saved one. But anyway, that's probably another debate. Anyway, so it's 2 each. And after that, Scott Bain, who had made some very good saves in the game. We did give him praise at the start of this. Eli Johan, then I can see your reaction here now. Eli Johan picks up the ball. Doesn't look like it's a relatively dangerous position. I mean, he strikes the ball from pretty far out. How often do you see the goalkeeper just catch them, or the player overhits it and it just goes over the bar? But somehow Scott Bain, I don't know if he was getting his position wrong or he misjudged it. He basically tries to catch the ball and it just sort of slips through his fingers and goes in. And I did kind of think when I was watching it, and it's maybe as easy to say this in hindsight, but all the saves Bain was making, there is a reason he's barely played. And 2021, I think that game, December 2021 against St Mirren, when St Mirren had all the COVID call-offs, and I think Celtic did as well, or Joe Hart was injured. I can't remember the exact reason why. That was the last time Bain had played, and it was pretty evident here to see why he's not really been involved. It was just a really poor bit of goalkeeping, wasn't it?
It gave me PTSD about Barkas sort of incidents, but even then, I don't even think Barkas has thrown it into the net the way Bain did there. He was having a good game, but you were always a bit worried at that point. You know that players will revert to type eventually when they've got enough minutes on the pitch, and it seems as if Bain did something that we expected Scott Bain to do, because we've seen that in the whole 2021 season. We've seen him making mistakes in that. Even seen him make a mistake in the first game of last season against Hearts when he didn't come out for was it John Shooter's header? It looked like a team shot, and he just throws it into the net. It just reminded me of Karius in the Champions League final. It was an absolute howler of a mistake, and it just compounded. It just compounded the whole game, really. I knew when it was 3-2, when it was 2 each and then it was 3-2, I knew we weren't going to come back in the game. It was just one of those ones where the whole team looked absolutely resigned to a defeat, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think from that point, even though it was only 3-2 at that stage, you didn't really see Celtic getting back in it. You can just tell with games sometimes it's just not going your way. And not long after that, it was 4-2. I think it was Nisbet again. There was a header, kind of put at Bain's near post, and he basically he didn't quite chuck it in, but he almost did. I can't really find another way to describe it. It looked like he was trying to save it to block it out, and inadvertently he just kind of deflected off and went in, but it was neither the best bit of goalkeeping.
If that was the 4-2 goal, then Bernabei actually gets the own goal for that.
Does Bernabei get the own goal? Was that who it was? I thought it was Kevin. Right, sorry.
It compounded his very mixed night, because he basically set up 2 goals, but he got an own goal, and his defending was a bit lax as well. So it was a really 50-50 night from Bernabei at the very most, I would say. I know I was talking to Tony last night, and he was trying to defend him, saying he'd done a lot in the attacking end of things, but defensively, I thought he was just really poor, and that compounded it, that deflection into the net.
I honestly did not even realise it was an own goal that happened there. I think as soon as the highlights were up, that was me chucking it. But yeah, that does kind of just sum it up. Mistake from Bain there, mistake from Bernabei. That's probably just the overall sort of summation of this game, and that's what will probably be remembered for, really. Those two, and potentially Ralston, just those, Bernabei and Ralston just really struggling to get a grip on things. But yeah, overall it was disappointing, Ryan, and I think that's the first time Celtic have lost 4 goals domestically since Rangers beat us 2-1, 4-1, sorry, at the end of the COVID season in the league, as far as I can remember. I don't know if there was a game last season Celtic lost 4 goals. I feel like there wasn't, not domestically anyway. I know there was matches in Europe, but I think that's the last time that happened. So that's nearly 2 years. It kind of shows you how rare it is, and probably is why people are getting maybe some potential PTSD looking back on Scott being in goals and Celtic conceding quite a lot of them, because it happened so regularly during that campaign. But obviously, as we move away slightly from the actual match itself, Ange was speaking after the game, and he took responsibility for a lot of it, saying, I've been making quite a lot of changes. Guys that haven't been involved, I've been trying to put them in. He also said he hadn't Scott Bain will bounce back from it, which is probably just Andrew Goya. Poor Bain hasn't played the game all season. He needed the run. I don't know if that's what Andrew was trying to do, but I don't think it quite planned out as he was hoping. But obviously, in terms of, people have probably heard it now, Andrew, he was speaking to BBC after the match. I think it was Brian McLaughlin that was interviewing him, and he basically asked Ange, do you need a stronger squad for next season? And Ange wasn't very happy. He replied, come on, mate, do you want us to win the league by 20 points next year? Is that the thing? I get it and I understand the question, but if you want to measure us on the last 3 games, then you probably need a different manager as well. This squad has handled Champions League. It's in the final of a cup competition and won a cup competition already, and they've also won the league. The squad is fine and we will strengthen as we always do. Like I said, this result's on me, and I'm making a lot of changes this evening and playing a lot of guys who have not played, and that's why we're getting the results. I just think in this crazy world of Scottish football, if you can't see past the obvious, then I don't really know what to tell you. Now, you can see there with those comments that Andrew's not very happy with the line of question. But I know we did discuss off air, Ryan, whether or not Celtic maybe do need a stronger squad. Now, it depends how you categorise that. Do you categorise that as you need to bring in 7 or 8 players? Or do you say that as we need to bring in 1 or 2 because most of the squad are fine? It's probably maybe a debate for a separate video, but firstly, were you surprised at Ange's reaction when he was asked that?
No, I wasn't surprised. I expected the sort of spiky comments from Ange, especially considering the amount of changes that he'd made. Before the game, I was actually quite excited to see that team because it was a number of fringe players that I did want to see get game time. I was thinking maybe they would have get game time at the weekend, and it would have been a stronger squad last night, but obviously that wasn't the case. In terms of increasing or strengthening the squad, I think we just need to do that every season. I think, but what we need is 3 or 4 players that are going to come in and just come into the first team. Like, we don't need to make wholesale changes. There's other teams that need to go about a rebuild because of contracts expiring, etc. But I think Celtic just need 3 or 4 players that are really going to come in and improve the squad and improve on positions that are maybe already quite strong. They just need to make them stronger for Europe, because the Champions League is where we're really, really going to get tested next season, and we need to bring in players that are good enough for that level, or good enough to sort of improve to the level required for the Champions League. I don't think there needs to be like wholesale changes in terms of signings, but 3 or 4 to come in to sort of replace players that are leaving and maybe replace players that are wanting to move away. That would be fine by me. But Ange's comments are okay for me, but at the same time, you're like, I was expecting him to maybe be a tiny bit more disappointed after last night, but it seems as if he's not as bothered, which I suppose that's his prerogative. But for me, I was quite annoyed after the game, and maybe he is more annoyed when he goes into the dressing room, and maybe he's not showing that to the media so that he's not attacking the players. But it's one of those ones that I was disappointed, but I'm glad at the same time that Ange was sticking up for these players in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't always surprised either with how he reacted to that comment, and I think he probably is hammering them in the dressing room because we know it's not been good enough recently. But Kaiser's saying we definitely need to trim the dead weight around the entire squad. That's also just similar to what you touched on there, Ryan. I do think that Celtic do have a pretty strong core first 11. I've been saying that throughout the season. That I'm not just going to change that because of the last few games, but maybe in the backup positions, And obviously, you never really sign a player to be back up. You want them to always challenge for the first team position. I think Celtic do maybe need to invest in a couple of fullbacks that are going to challenge Taylor and Johnson, unless, Ralston are going to have a strong pre-season, maybe another centre-half in there, regardless if Carter Vickers is available straight away at the start for pre-season. I would still maybe be looking at a centre-half. Goalkeeper, I think, is another position Celtic have really got to strengthen. And I know people were asking about Seagrass there. The last time I think Ange was asked about it, at the time he was injured. He then obviously, I think he's been available since then. We don't know the full reason why he's not been really making the bench at all. I think the last time he was sort of involved in the bench in any capacity, he played, was it at Motherwell in the League Cup, I think it was, which was away back last year. And then I think he was on the bench for a couple of the European games, but really since that tour of Australia, he's featured very rarely, if at all, in terms of the squads. Obviously, we know he's not played any minutes on the parks. Don't really know what's happening there, which is why Bain was obviously the automatic number 2 to start last night. But yeah, I think goalkeeper's another position they need to look at, and people maybe debating about through the middle as well, somebody that can sort of maybe help Kilo Guando. But I think the sort of fullbacks and another centre back for me is really, these last 3 or 4 games have made me think that when the main players aren't there, we need players that can come in and they don't need to be like for like the exact same. It's not going to be easy to get another Cameron Carter Vickers, I understand that, but you need somebody, I think, that can come in and put in a better shift than what's been going on right now besides Starfelt, because it feels like Starfelt's almost been playing himself at times in these recent games. He's getting dragged out of position to try and take responsibility elsewhere, and that's putting Celtic in even more trouble. So you would hope that that'll be things that will be addressed, and I'm sure they are, because the recruitment's been phenomenal since Ange came in. I've not got any doubt that Celtic will hopefully do good business in the summer transfer window. Players that you want to leave will move on, and there'll be exciting talent coming in. But at the moment, I think a wee freshen up would probably do the back four, the goalkeeper, and maybe some elements of the midfield quite good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just going back to the Seagrass sort of thing, he's not made a matchday squad for about 20, 25 games now. So that's really concerning for a goalkeeper that was really highly rated when he came in. I thought that maybe, well, at worst, he was going to be our second choice, at best, potentially first choice, because he'd be a younger goalkeeper. He's only, 31, 32. So I was thinking he could maybe make that position his own for the next couple of years. Don't know what's transpired. You don't want to start rumours about players falling out or players and managers falling out. But, I mean, these rumours are going to happen if you're not getting picked. And especially considering the fact that he's posting on Instagram that he's in training, it's clear that he is training with the squad. He's just not getting picked. So I don't know what's transpired, if something happened in Sydney, because it seems like since then he's not been quoted whatsoever, and that's concerning, especially for one of the summer signings as well. You want those players to come in and make an impact, because you're wanting the team to sort of accelerate and push on forward with each window. You want the team to be stronger than you want the team to be stronger coming out than we were coming into the window. So seeing players like this not even getting a game, basically just not taking a wage, but just sitting there, not really contributing to the team effort in terms of getting into the first team is really disappointing. But yeah, it's really difficult to sort of talk about Celtic at the moment, because I know we're in a really spoilt position because we're still on course for a treble, and we're going to get trophy day at the weekend. But the performances recently have been really, really disappointing. I can understand why they've happened, but at the same time, I can't help but feel disappointed in the way we've played. And I think just finally, just what you were talking about with changes in the team, I think it's better if you're changing maybe 2 or 3 positions every game. But once you start changing 5, 6, 7 sort of players in each position, you're starting to see that sort of fluidity leave the team. If different players in different positions, there's no harmony in the squad whatsoever. They don't know how to play with each other. So I think that's where things have fallen flat recently. But I mean, we've got I said it about the game last night, but we've got another game on Saturday to put it right, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, Ryan. You're spot on there. Hopefully they will have a strong end to the season with trophy day and then the cup final. But yeah, the performances can only get better. That's how I would look at it after this sort of wee recent mini run. And Seagrass, at the moment, he's one of the players I'm sort of earmarking that's going to be moving on in the summer. unless there's a major change over pre-season. We don't know what's happened there. It's probably something that'll come out in the wash eventually, but there's clearly an issue of some sort if he's fit and he's not making any squads and Scott Bain's in ahead of him all the time. There's also an issue there. But just before we finish up, obviously there's been a sort of wee bit of breaking news today. The first one being Celtic have confirmed their other pre-season friendly for the Tour of Asia and part of the Japanese league. They're going to be playing Gambo Osaka. It's another J-League club. It's who Celtic signed Ideguchi from, I believe. And that match, I think it's the 22nd of July, that's going to take place. It's been rumoured for a while now. I know, Ryan, you did a wee news hit on it. It feels like a while ago. Was it a couple of weeks ago? Basically, when it was being linked from Japanese media.
Yeah.
When the Japanese media tend to sort of speculate on these sort of things, or players, we've found that the majority of the time it's been correct. So that's why we got Ryan to do that at the time, and it turned out to be the case. So I don't know if that's basically going to complete the games now. We know Celtic's playing Yokohama in Japan, Gambo Osaka also in Japan, and then Wolves in South Korea. I don't know if there'll be another match or not, but that's obviously going to be interesting to see Celtic playing the J-League teams, also playing a Premier League team in Wolves. And the other thing that's been confirmed, I'll let you take the lead on this, Ryan, because I know it was you that flagged it, was James Forrest's testimonial.
Yeah, James Forrest has got a testimonial against friends of the club as well, which is quite interesting. In Athletic Bilbao, there's been quite a few sort of nice sort of interactions between the two clubs, and this is part of. It's like a joint one, so it's James Forrest 10 years. Obviously, I think he's past 10 years now, but it's good that he's getting a testimonial to sort of show his efforts over the past decade at the club. But it's also coinciding with Athletics. Sorry, I can't get that wrong. Athletic or a different team. Athletic Bilbao's.
He's almost committed there.
I know. I would have had Iker Muniain in my DMs or something getting raging at me, but yeah, it's 125th anniversary for Athletic Bilbao, so it's going to be at Celtic Park. I think at least they didn't mention Celtic Park, but they mentioned Celtic as the first of the two in terms of naming the two teams that were playing. So I'm presuming it's at Celtic Park. So that should be a good occasion, good relationship with the team we're playing against, and a good sort of night for James Forrest. I thought he wouldn't have been the only one. I thought Tom Rogic and Lear Beaton would have got a testimonial if they'd have stayed for an extra year, but obviously that wasn't the case. So it'll be good to see James Forrest get that sort of recognition from the club. So yeah, that should be a good occasion and a good preparation for Celtic.
Yeah, no, that's obviously, testimonials for players are always enjoyable occasions. I know people have got their opinions on James Forrest, but he has been a great servant for the club across his time. At the time, he was a phenomenal player. As his age and injuries have maybe caught up with him a wee bit, but the fact that that's happening, along with Bilbao, Kaiser was touching on there about how they had an amazing tribute for Billy McNeil Bilbao when he passed away. The fact that it's their anniversary, I'm sure if the game is at Parkhead, they'll bring a good support. So it should be interesting. Also, has there been a date confirmed for that, Ryan, or have we just kind of assumed it's going to make up part of Celtic's pre-season plans?
It's in August, I'm sure.
Right?
Let me just double check that.
Just before the season starts, obviously, I would assume.
Mm-hmm. We can sort of with all the results or with all the fixtures that we've got, we can kind of put together when Celtic are going to be playing over pre-season and their sort of schedule. So it is a good schedule. I like the fact that we're playing J-League teams, and then I don't want to say higher opposition, but maybe more difficult opposition in Wolves and Athletic Bilbao. Obviously, they're in the sort of top end of La Liga, so that's good preparation coming out of the season for Celtic. Just before we finish, I think it's important to also mention that it was 56 years ago today that Celtic won the European Cup in Lisbon. Probably the best day in Celtic's history. So 56 years, Celtic were the first British team to win the European Cup. It was the first time the European Cup was on British shores. You see, well, obviously me and you were far too young to even remember that or even have any reason to remember that. But we've all watched the videos, and it was a truly impressive day in Lisbon. So I just wanted to mention that.
I believe even Tony, to be fair, it was a bit before his time as well. We don't want to tar him with that. But yeah, obviously, the most famous day in the club's history. Doesn't get much bigger than that. I think everything's kind of been said about it at this point. But yeah, the sort of iconic moments. Yesterday for our newsletter, we reprinted Tony's interview with John Clark that he did last year at that point it was 55 years since Lisbon, and he sort of discussed that in detail, which was a nice piece that we thought was worth putting out on the sort of eve of the anniversary, as it was at that point. But yep, indeed, that's obviously always positive. People are enjoying that in the comments. Seamus Gallagher and the heat of Lisbon. Jerry Smith saying, here, Ryan. Wesley, looking forward to Trophy Day, guys. Champions, that's all that matters. Hail, the line, 67. My youngest daughter and my grandson both managed to get themselves born the 26th May. I was gutted that neither of them had the decency to be born a day earlier, says Pete McGee, which is quite a story there, Pete, I've got to say. Andrew Galea saying, you turned out on a good report, good watching you, good show, Ryan. Enjoy the weekend. Cheers, Andrew.
Cheers, mate.
Of course, it's always important to touch on Lisbon, and good time you saved it there, Ryan, because that would have been a bit of a schoolboy either from us who didn't mention.
Yeah, I'm glad we're getting the nice comments just now, because I know for a fact if we'd forgotten that, we would have been public enemy number one for forgetting about the most impressive and most iconic day in Celtic's history. So I think it's important for even younger supporters like us to sort of keep that sort of legend alive. That we will never ever forget about the team that done that. They are world famous. I mean, even reading that piece yesterday from Tony, it's just incredible. Like John Clark, he didn't want to be a celebrity. He just wanted to be a normal guy, and that was so. It was so much like players in that day. Football was just a job to them, basically. That was their job. That's what they went and done. They didn't want any of the fame that went along with it. But unfortunately for John Clark and the rest of the Lisbon Lions, fortunately or unfortunately, they will never be forgotten, because their names will just go on in Celtic history forever, and quite rightly so, because they're all legends. And the Lisbon Lions will stay on and live on forever.
Indeed, Ryan. Couldn't have said it much better myself. I think that is a good way to round it up. So thanks everybody for joining in, guys. We really appreciate the comments. And me and Tony will be back tomorrow to preview Trophy Day, which is obviously one of the sort of most hotly anticipated days on the calendar. So we'll be looking forward to that. Just before we go, once again, anybody that's interested, the ticker tape down below. We're running our best ever offer, £12 for a year's worth of access to the website. Support top quality journalism covering the club you love. A part of your subscription, you'll have videos of people like Ryan, interviews of people like Tony, data analysis, scouting. So get yourself involved if that interests you. www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Ryan, thanks very much for joining us, mate. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cheers. See you tomorrow, guys.
Cheers, guys.